My friends, we are here today to talk about the walking tragedy that is Lord Windgrace. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, and welcome to my video on the new Commander 2018 spoiled card, Lord Windgrace. Now, when I say walking tragedy, I do not mean that the card itself is bad. We'll go into why he is a tragic figure in Magic history. Lord Grindwaste is really interesting. That's why I remember his name. Anyways, this is a character that people have made a lot of fan cards over the year. People have wanted Lord Windgrace for a long time. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the card itself and we'll see what we're dealing with. Now, first thing I want to point out is I believe that this version of Lord Windgrace is an earlier version before this. This is pre-Silex Blast, okay? So Lord Windgrace has been around for a considerable amount of time. It's not exactly known the entire length of his life, but before the Silex Blast leveled the forest area that he was in and messed it all up, he had been ruling that area and helping the local cat people tribes for about 300 years at least. So he's been around for a while. And this is him in his form before the tragedy strikes, before his life essentially gets ruined and he becomes that tragic figure. So for a green, a red, and a black, 2 colorless, you get a 5 loyalty planeswalker. His +2 is discard a card, then draw a card. If a land card is discarded this way, draw an additional card. -3, return up to 2 target land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. And -11, destroy up to 6 target non-land permanents, then create 6 2/2 green cat warrior creature tokens with Forest Walk. So, the fact that this doesn't really have anything to do with any kind of real artifact hate or anything, because Windgrace ends up as an absolute hater of Artifice. This makes it feel like this is an earlier incarnation. Now, what's interesting to note about Windgrace is there are spells of every color that involve him. One of my favorite cards that involve Windgrace, just the flavor text actually. The artwork for me doesn't really work because it doesn't look like a black panther dude getting illuminated. However, that's a minor quibble. The flavor text says, "Phyrexia is an unforgiving place, and I am an angry lord in an unforgiving mood." When I read that, I actually just changed it to me and changed it to "YouTube is an unforgiving place, and I am an angry lord in an unforgiving mood." I'm like, yeah! Anyways, that flavor text is fantastic. It helps to illustrate, kind of the flavor behind how he ended up later on. At this point, the card we're seeing, he's still... basically, the cat people viewed him as a god. So he'd been serving in that capacity as a god figure to the cat people of his area. Now, this was obviously not meant to last, as we have said. He is a tragic figure. So we're gonna get into that. He started out as the warrior chief of his own tribe, acting as the god, basically the god folk overall for the cats. He remembers Urborg when Urborg wasn't a swamp. Now Urborg is a swampy, marshy kind of island with an insanely dense concentration of black mana. But at one time, Urborg was actually a forest. Now the Silex Blast and Urza ties into a lot of things in the old history. Urza's a really interesting character. I was thinking about it. Urza is a vicious prick. It's interesting that it's the kind of hero / almost anti-hero in a way, with the damage that he does to the world and the things that happen out of his desire to do good or get vengeance. Whatever it is, Urza's the hero, but he's not a 100% likable guy. I feel like the characters they make now with Planeswalkers are all very narrow. It's like Liliana can be selfish and evil because she's the black one, but the green one has to be nature aligned and the white one has to be all like, I am good and whatever. And they didn't try that nonsense. They didn't try and make such trite, silly, like cookie cutter style Planeswalkers back in the day. So you have Urza who comes in here basically, and he sets off the Silex Blast, and that completely fucks up Urborg. The forest ends up turning into a swamp. Now Windgrace stays there. He ends up being recruited by Urza to take the war to Phyrexia, because Phyrexia is a massive a massive threat, obviously. And Windgrace sees that, actually. There's a group, they're called the Nine Titans. And there's a card that references the group of them and actually shows Windgrace off on the side. It's got some really cool artwork. The card itself is not very strong. It's called Implode. And it's not a particularly strong card. 5 mana, destroy target land, draw a card. And this is because they moved away from making strong land destruction, because that makes the game unfun when nobody can play it. But the flavor text is what we're here to focus on mostly. To save Dominaria, 9 planeswalkers sought the annihilation of Phyrexia itself. And you can see Windgrace there as they're trying this implode method. It's pretty amazing, really. This artwork is really interesting. And to tell you the truth, I'd never really paid attention to it until I went back to look at it. And speaking of interesting artwork, let's just throw up another one here that has Windgrace in it that I like. And that's Illuminate. This one's interesting because this is him using blue and red magic. So, as I said, he has aspects of all the different colors. The Divine Light showed that as well. So Windgrace uses all 5 colors of magic, which is pretty rare. So he's one of the 9 Titans, and we're not going to go much into detail with that. But then the group of we'll just touch on the 9 Titans for how it references Windgrace here. Basically, Windgrace was one of the 9 Titans. These 9 Titans were recruited by Urza to take down Phyrexia. They were given these awful mech suits. Now, I don't like these mech suits. Just like I didn't like the vehicles, like Fleetwheel Cruiser and things like that they have in Kaladesh. I really genuinely do not like these mech suits that Urza has created. I think that they could have been done thematically as different kinds of magical armor, and it would have worked out better. But that part aside, we're going to ignore that and just talk about the suits themselves. 9 of these were crafted by Urza. They're all to protect the Planeswalkers against Phyrexia, because if you watched the video we talked previously about how Urza pushed his way into Phyrexia, but he only made it so many planes deep because it's noxious. There's all kinds of things he wasn't expecting. So with that knowledge, he created these Titan suits. He created 9 of them. But like I said, he's a vicious bastard. So he actually, inside the suits, he created he put in a feature where he could basically kill who was ever in the suit if they turned against him. So when Urza basically went crazy and ended up killing Taysir using the suits. And Taysir, just so you know, before they kind of changed the history of Magic to a degree, Taysir was actually the most powerful planeswalker. There was the plane that he came from, where he came from, was fractured into 1,000 versions of itself, with 1,000 versions of everybody, except for Taysir. Taysir only had 1 copy of himself for each of the 5 fundamental colors of Magic. And the legend was that when all 5 versions of himself were brought together, it would create the most powerful planeswalker in existence. So that was Taysir. Taysir was wiped out by Urza when he went crazy using the suit. Windgrace actually took Taysir's heart, his planeswalker heart, from his chest and put it into his own chest. So Windgrace actually has 2 hearts inside of his chest now. He has 2 planeswalkers' hearts. He did this because of particular religious beliefs of where he's from about protecting the raising through zombification. So by taking Taysir's heart, his planeswalker body could not be raised for nefarious purposes, and that would protect him from people like Tevish Zot, because Tevish Zot was one of the 9 Titans as well, and he's pure evil. That guy is not to be trusted. But Urza just included him in the group planning for his betrayal to kill him and use his energy, because Urza's a twisted bastard, but he's a really interesting character. So we've got this situation where you've got Windgrace. He went through this situation with Urza, with him being responsible for the Silex Blast, Urza going crazy and killing Taysir. So Windgrace at this point basically just hates Urza, right? He's lost it. He no longer wants anything to do with Urza or anything related to Urza. Now, for those of you who don't know, Urza, before he started out as a planeswalker, was an archaeologist, right? So he's hard into artifice. Urza creates artifacts. That's what he's all about, Urza the Artificer, right? So Windgrace pushes in that hard natural direction where he's fully against artifice. So when the Time Spiral crisis emerged, Windgrace ended up having dominion over the slivers and a bunch of other natural creatures, and he directed them to destroy absolutely all artifacts they could find and anybody associated with them. Just wipe them all out. This was during the time of the Time Spiral Planar Chaos block, and so What was going on is, for those of you who don't know, just going to touch on it briefly, obviously, just enough history for you to understand without going deep into it. There are time rifts that were created. Now, they've all been sealed now. At the point we're at currently in Magic history, these have all been sealed. But back then, they hadn't been sealed. Each of these rifts were created by planeswalkers, and they destabilize time and the world they're connected to. And all these rifts pretty much are all located in Dominaria, right? Like, they're all in Dominaria, and Dominaria is the nexus. It is what everything is connected to. It is like, it's the hub of the wheel. All the spokes connect to it. So anything that happens in Dominaria is going to ripple outwards and have a huge effect. So there's all these different rifts during the time spiral block that needed to be closed and dealt with. Now, all of them were created by planeswalkers with the exception of one. There was one that was created by the Wrathy Overlay, and that's the one we're actually going to be dealing with, the one that affected Windgrace's home of Urborg, because Urborg ended up with a rift in it, because the Wrathy Overlay, which was a plan to actually take the entire plane of existence of Wrath and meld and overlay it into Dominaria. It was an insane plan that actually ended up mostly working. The idea was to build up a huge army in your world and get that army to another world, not through portals, not through anything like that, but literally melding to the two worlds so your troops were there. But the problem is it had unintended side effects. A bunch of people ended up getting mutated and stuff like that. And over the main site of the stronghold, which was like the nexus of where the overlay happened, it created a rift in Urborg. So Windgrace attempted to seal the time rift that was created by the overlay using his magic to prevent a mass of Phyrexians, because Phyrexians were about to start invading through this rift, and Windgrace knew it was going to all be over if he didn't do something. So he used his magic to seal the rift, and it was working. But near the end of the process, basically the magic of the rift grabbed onto Windgrace's magic and his life force and sucked it all away from him out into the rift. And that's the end. That's how Windgrace dies. Windgrace is gone from Magic history after that point, mostly. I mean, technically, he's still around in that before he went and did the ritual to seal the rift that cost him his life, which he wasn't expecting, but thought might be a possibility. He went ahead and bound himself into Urborg, his spirit into Urborg. So while he's dead and his planeswalker body and his spirit mostly are gone, part of his spirit still actually remains in Urborg. They're not able to find like tangible traces of it. But as far as I'm concerned, that's what's going on here. So the card itself, when we look at the card, it's not tied into later on down the road where he's gone crazy and he's destroying art, like every bit of artifacts. Although you can tie that into you can totally tie that into what's it called? What's the name of the card? Sorry, Windgrace's Judgment, right? Because Windgrace's Judgment does have that kind of a feel to it there. So that one obviously can tie into that concept. The other thing that's interesting to note is that Ariel of Windgrace is actually from Urborg, right? And she is from the knights that are allied with the Panther warriors of Urborg. So that's why she has that amazing Panther mount. Now that's really cool. I like these little ties to the history. Windgrace is a really cool and noble character. In terms of the artwork, he looks really intense. When you look at a cat planeswalker, the other obvious example we have is a Johnny. And lions have a completely different feel to them because of the mane and everything, and the eyes too. The panther eyes and everything. Windgrace looks really intense. He looks ready to spring into action. That flaming, like molten, not flaming, but superheated hand of his stands out so well against the lush greenness of it, and it shows what he's lost, right? I mean, that's his home before, this really deep green lush land, and that all just gets sunk down and it becomes a big mire swamp to the point where Urborg is such a deep source of black mana that it corrupts areas around it as well. So Windgrace to me is most assuredly a tragic character. He was a dude who lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, essentially as the cat god, lording over and protecting the tribes of his cat people, just living that life that he wanted to live. And then because of the Wrathy Overlay invasion plan, the rift ends up happening, and then he has to give up his life. That's rough, man. So, let me know what you guys thought of this. I found this really interesting. I love seeing these old cards. So thanks for coming by, and I'll see you guys next time. Actually, wait a minute. You know what? I forgot. We have to thank the newest Golden Lord of Purple and welcome on in Jay Boosh, Jay Mouseman. Welcome to the Golden Lords of Purple. Thanks for joining my Patreon, baller boy. We'll see you in the end scroll down below where I keep my dong.
And together, we are the sixth color of magic! Magic. Sixth color of magic.
They call me Perp.